In the world of mountaineering, there are certain peaks that stand out as being particularly dangerous and treacherous. But even among these dangerous mountains, one stands out as being the deadliest of them all. This is Lenin Peak, standing tall at 7,134 meters, or 2,346 feet. It is the highest peak in the Caucasus Mountains, and also the most climbed mountain, over 7 kilometers tall. And it's no secret why. Unlike many other mountains of its size, Lenin Peak doesn't require any technical climbing skills. All you need to do is walk up its southern slope, which is covered with gravel and dirt. From a distance, it may look like a nice and simple climb, but this is far from the truth. The allure of Lenin Peak has attracted adventurers and mountaineers from all over the world. In fact, as of 2019, more than 35,000 people have climbed this mountain, and because of its popularity, it's given the mountain another nickname, which is the Mountain of Success. But don't let that fool you, because under the surface of this seemingly easy route lies a dangerous and unforgiving environment. Storms can appear suddenly and without warning, making the ascent even more perilous. Even in the best of conditions, the altitude, the cold, and the lack of oxygen can be a challenge for even the most experienced climbers. But that hasn't stopped people from trying. It's believed that the first person to reach the summit of Lenin Peak was a Russian mountaineer named Sergei Yurkovich in 1934, and since then, thousands more have followed in his footsteps. One of those people was part of a large group of 25 climbers who set out to conquer the peak in August of 1997. Little did they know they would soon become part of a terrifying ordeal that would go down in history as the deadliest mountain expedition ever. The team was led by experienced guides Vasily Piskarev and Yuri Samoylov, who had successfully summited the mountain several times before. Most of the climbers were beginners who had come to experience the thrill of reaching such a high altitude. Among them were a married couple from Bulgaria, Boris and Venka, along with their 2 teenage sons, and a father and son duo from Moscow, Viktor and Dmitry. The group started their journey full of excitement and anticipation. After spending a few days at a lower camp, they began their final ascent to the peak. As they made their way up the mountain, the group encountered the harsh conditions that Lenin Peak is known for. The wind howled around them, making it difficult to hear anything. The temperature dropped to dangerous levels, and the sky grew darker by the minute. Despite the challenging conditions, the group pressed on. They had come too far to turn back now, and so they continued their ascent towards the summit. And then the unthinkable happened. An avalanche roared down the mountainside, engulfing the group in a wall of snow and ice. The force of the avalanche was so strong that it knocked the climbers off their feet and sent them tumbling down the mountain. Many were injured, and some were completely buried in the snow. It was a scene of utter chaos and panic as the group struggled to free themselves from the snow and debris. Some managed to get themselves upright, but others were not so lucky. The avalanche had come out of nowhere, and they had not had time to prepare. As the dust settled and the noise of the avalanche faded away, a chilling silence fell over the mountainside. The group looked around and realized the true scale of the disaster. Many of them were injured, and some were missing. To make matters worse, the weather was still as hostile as ever. The wind continued to howl and the temperature continued to drop. And as night fell, the situation became even more desperate. Those who were still there knew that they needed to take action fast. If they stayed there throughout the night in the freezing temperatures, they would eventually succumb to hypothermia. So, despite their injuries and the darkness all around them, they decided to start their descent down the mountain. Slowly but surely, the group began to make their way down the mountainside. Each step was a struggle as they battled against the elements and their own exhaustion. But they knew that if they could just get to a lower altitude, they would be out of danger. After what felt like an eternity, they finally reached the safety of a lower camp. But their ordeal was not over yet. Of the 25 people who had started the ascent, only 2 had made it back to the camp alive. Miraculously, the rest had either been killed by the avalanche or had gone missing during the descent. The 2 survivors were Mira and Alexei, a young couple who had been on their honeymoon at the time of the accident. A rescue party was quickly organized to search for the missing climbers, but the harsh weather conditions made it difficult for the rescuers to reach the site of the avalanche. Days turned into weeks, and still there was no sign of the missing climbers. The only clue that the rescue team had to go on was the last known location of the group, which was somewhere on the northern slope of the peak. The search was further complicated by the fact that Lenin Peak is located in a remote area of the Caucasus Mountains. The nearest town was several hours away, and the terrain was rough and difficult to navigate. Despite the challenges, the rescue team pressed on. They braved the harsh weather conditions and the difficult terrain in the hope of finding the missing climbers. But as time went on, it became clear that their chances of survival were slim. Finally, after weeks of searching, the rescue team was forced to give up the search. The incident became one of the deadliest in the history of mountaineering. Out of the 25 people who had started the ascent, only 2 had survived. The question is, how did such a large group of experienced climbers die? Well, the answer lies in the unique challenges that Lenin Peak presents. One of the biggest problems that climbers face on Lenin Peak is the unpredictable weather. As the second highest peak in Europe, Lenin Peak is subject to harsh and sudden changes in weather. Storms can appear out of nowhere, bringing with them strong winds, heavy snowfall and freezing temperatures. Even in the summer months, temperatures on the peak can drop to -20 degrees Celsius or 4 degrees Fahrenheit. These conditions can make it difficult to see, disorient the climber, and make it hard to maintain a safe footing on the icy terrain. In the case of the group of 25 climbers, they had been caught in a surprise storm that led to the deadly avalanche. The storm had struck suddenly, knocking the climbers off their feet and burying them in snow. Some had been separated from the group and injured in the fall. Others had been completely buried and suffocated as the snow pressed down on their chests, making it impossible for them to breathe. The avalanche had been so powerful that it had wiped out the entire group. Only 2 climbers had managed to survive. But the harsh weather conditions on Lenin Peak don't just put climbers at risk during storms. Even when the weather is calm, the altitude and the cold can be a challenge. At 7,134 meters, or 2,346 feet, Lenin Peak is one of the tallest mountains in the world. The thin air at such a high altitude means that there is less oxygen available to breathe. This can make it difficult for climbers to stay awake and alert, and it can also make it harder for them to think clearly and make good decisions. In addition to the altitude, the freezing temperatures on Lenin Peak can also be a challenge. Climbers need to wear several layers of warm clothing and take frequent breaks to avoid hypothermia. Those who don't take proper precautions can quickly find themselves in a life-threatening situation. In the case of the group of 25 climbers, the harsh weather conditions on Lenin Peak had contributed to their demise, while the deadly avalanche had been the main cause of the tragedy. The other conditions, such as the altitude and the cold, had also played a role. The climbers had been well prepared for the ascent, but the unexpected storm had caught them off guard. The events of August 1997 serve as a reminder of the power of nature and the importance of respecting the mountains. Even for experienced climbers, things can go wrong very quickly, and even the most experienced and well-prepared teams can be caught off guard. While the search for the missing climbers had been unsuccessful, the story didn't end there. Several years later, in 2008, something remarkable happened. As the glacier on the mountain began to melt due to rising global temperatures, the bodies of some of the missing climbers were found. The discovery of the bodies brought a sense of closure to the families of the victims. It also served as a reminder of the human cost of climate change. The melting of the glacier had exposed the remains of those who had died on the mountain, serving as a grim reminder of the dangers of climate change and the importance of respecting the power of nature. The discovery of the bodies also led to a renewed focus on safety measures for climbers attempting to conquer Lenin Peak. Officials and mountaineering experts worked together to develop new guidelines and protocols to ensure that such a tragedy would never repeat itself. Despite the tragedy, Lenin Peak continues to attract climbers from all over the world. However, the memory of those who died in the 1997 avalanche serves as a constant reminder of the importance of respect and caution when taking on such a challenging climb.